Hello, and welcome to Zero Touch Enrollment, a beginner's case study. My name is David Williams. I am the Director of IT Systems and Support for Cheyenne Mountain School District in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I'd like to start today by talking about what this session is and what this session is not. A little bit of a disclaimer. This is not a step-by-step how-to for zero-touch enrollment. I'm going to share with you some resources that are great step-by-step walkthroughs for zero-touch enrollment. You are not going to hear from a Jamf expert today. I am a Jamf associate. I've been working with Jamf since 2017. I've learned a lot, but I still have a lot to learn. What this will be is an in-depth case study of our path to zero-touch enrollment. You're going to get to see the steps we took, the challenges we faced, the successes we had along the way, share some insider knowledge, and hopefully when you come out of this, you're going to be able to take what we had to go through, what we had to do, and apply that to your situation. The topics we're going to cover today: who we are as a school district, where we started with our technology, what our model looked like, why we chose to move to zero touch. There are some very compelling reasons to go to zero touch. I'm going to share with you some resources that got me started. Those resources will also be available in the handout session. And we'll talk about our path to zero touch, some of the steps we had to follow, basic steps. We're not going to walk through it step by step. And some challenges we met along the way, some decisions we had to make, and I'll even share some ongoing challenges that we have where we're just working through a couple of things to smooth out the process a little bit. So starting with who we are. We are a small school district. We have 3,800 students total, 500 staff, 7 schools. We always are suffering from a tight budget, and for us, our hardware lifecycle is very critical. We just retired our 2011 iMacs. That should tell you something about our hardware lifecycle. They had a first life as teacher machines, and they had a second life as accessory machines here and there throughout our school district. We have another year and a half on some 2012 MacBook Pros that will still run OS 10.15 Catalina. And we have machines as new as 2020 MacBook Airs. So we run the spectrum of hardware on our life cycle. Where we started, most staff members had a desktop iMac. Those of you who are remembering what you had to do for COVID are probably laughing right now. We only had a few laptops. Our school admins had laptops. Our school specialists who had to travel around, a few of those had laptops. And our paradigm was a full touch deployment by the tech department. We used imaging up until OS 10.13. We used imaging quite a bit to refresh machines. End users really had no role whatsoever in the deployment of their devices, in the management of their devices. If something was wrong, the tech department took care of it. When a machine came in, we unboxed it, we got it enrolled, we installed all the software, we took care of it. And that doesn't work for the situations that we found ourselves in. And that brings us to why we chose to move. Number one reason we chose to move is the COVID pandemic. That forced a number of changes to our traditional teaching model. More staff required mobility. We had teachers teaching from an office or from their house, and so they needed to be able to move their devices. So when we, a little bit of backstory here, when we ran into having to shut down, having to send teachers home, we had a 2-week shutdown, and then we went to remote learning for the rest of the semester in March and April of 2020. So those teachers with iMacs picked up those iMacs and took them home. We had to push out a few policies in about 24 hours to make sure that they could connect to their home Wi-Fi as limited users. And so that was a situation that we knew was not a long-term situation. It worked for what we needed to do, but it was never going to be long-term. So we had been already using self-service with users and promoting user responsibility for their device management, the ability to run updates, the ability to install some optional software. And so we had already been doing a kind of a light version of moving toward end user responsibility for device management. Combine that with the fact that with the release of the M1 MacBook Air, Apple priced that at what for us was a competitive price. So we started looking seriously at that as a teacher machine, and we are approaching our next hardware replacement cycle. We've probably already overshot it, actually. The vast majority of the devices on teachers' desks are 2015 iMacs, so those are now 6 years old, and we're looking down the barrel of a big hardware replacement. So we really need to we really need to make sure that we've got a, a setup that works with where teaching has gone to now, and that setup is going to be zero touch enrollment. Before I jump in, I'll share with you those resources, and these are also in the handout. Some two videos that I found. I went back and watched over and over again just to make sure that I knew where I was headed and knew what I was doing. Bill Smith, you can also find him as Talking Moose. How to make zero touch deployment a reality. And that video is on YouTube. And again, that link is in the handout. And Lana Trong did a session at the 2020 virtual JNUC, Enrollment Customizations and Zero Touch Deployment and the End User Experience. And that video is now also found on YouTube. That link also is in the handout. So those two resources, in addition to some other things that I found, but those two resources were instrumental. I went back and watched key sections of those over and over again. So our path to zero touch, we had to start with what were we going to use to start testing this. We didn't have any extra laptops that were pretty new. What we had extras of were some laptops that we had retired from student mobile carts, 2012 MacBook Pros. Those can go up to 1015 Catalina. And we had on the way some 2020 MacBook Airs. Those, of course, will run up through the current OS, Big Sur. We had to decide what our workflow would be for wiping those machines and re-enrolling those machines. And having come from the land of re-imaging, I got to say I really love the fact that that Mac has gone to recovery boot, recovery mode, and we're actually using that on as we have staff turnover. We are going from what our old model was to now using recovery mode to re-enroll a machine, start with a fresh OS, fresh current OS, and it works pretty well. So that's where we started. We tested initially with those 1015 Catalina machines that were 2012 MacBook Pros, and then once we kind of got things down with that, we moved on to some new 2020 MacBook Airs. We've got a screen grab here of some of the settings that we set up in our pre-stage enrollment. So we had to decide, were we going to use one pre-stage enrollment, or were we going to have multiple pre-stages? And I tested both, and I fell back on one pre-stage for all devices that would be zero touch enrollment. And so, of course, making the MDM mandatory. You've got some other options down at the bottom. You have the setup assistant. You can choose with devices that are OS 11 and higher to have the setup assistant automatically perform many of those functions. And most importantly is the enrollment customization. That's the thing that makes this enrollment process come to life. So we decided on what those steps would be, and we'll get into that a little bit more in just a moment. But that setting that enrollment customization, and so I set one up for staff. If we need one for students in the future, we will set that one up as well. A few more screen grabs of just some of the basic settings on our pre-stage enrollment. This is something that we thought long and hard about. Do we make our end users local administrators on their machines, or do we keep them as limited users? And we kicked that idea back and forth. Do we have a local tech admin account and have a standard local user, or do we not even worry about a tech admin account and just make the end users admin users? In the end, we came down on keeping that local admin account and keeping our users as standard users. But again, it's a decision that you can make for yourself. Bill Smith has a thing in the video that I linked where he says that information has a way of trying to become free and get out into the world, and that's the admin password. So in the end, we chose to keep an admin password, a local admin for tech in place, and that has a universal password. And we also recycle that password. We can change that password across every machine with a policy. So we do that on a regular basis now. Next thing we had to do for the enrollment customization was figure out a way for users to authenticate, so that an end user can get in and start that enrollment process instead of it happening automatically. The end user is going to put in their username and password. So we are a Google school district. We use Google Apps. So we chose to go with the Google Cloud LDAP, and we ran into a few issues with that. I put a link down there at the bottom of the screen. That link is also in the handouts, and that link can help you if you happen to be using Google. That link can help you set up your Google Cloud LDAP. Just a couple of things there. And then one of the things we found was, and I'll share this more with some of our challenges. We found that the way that our initial OU structure was set up in Google made it a challenge for the mapping in our between Google Cloud and Jamf. So I had to mess around with some of the settings. So again, if you're a Google user and you're looking to do this, your OU structure in Google may have an effect on how that Google Cloud LDAP works in Jamf. And so we eventually hit the sweet spot with some of the settings, and we were able to map users out just fine. So the Google Cloud LDAP becomes part of an enrollment customization. So we created an enrollment customization for all staff. It's one customization regardless of the building you're in, regardless of your position. So one enrollment customization. And this is really where the process of zero-touch enrollment becomes a reality and comes to life. This is where you walk the user through what the enrollment process looks like. So one of the things we had to decide on was how much user interaction to do. Do we? How many click-throughs do we have? And we tried to put in the fewest number we could possibly put in, and still get through what we needed to get through. So we have a start page that says, "Hey, we're going to do user enrollment." We next ask the user to attach the asset tag to the bottom of their computer. And then we warn them that on the next page they're going to do an enrollment authentication where they put in their Google username and password, and then the next page says, now you're going to create your account. So those were the steps that we finally fell on. We had more in there, and as we went through it, we realized it was very clunky. So we decided to cut it down and just go with what we felt was the bare minimum. So here's what our enrollment customization looks like. We have a welcome screen. We used our logo up at the top of the screen. That's just the standard logo for our school district. So it says "Welcome to enrollment for D12 staff." And on this page, we ask them to attach the asset tag to the bottom of their computer. And on this page, we warn them we're getting ready to authenticate your enrollment, and then we move to the enrollment authentication. And so I tested this on a number of users, and some users wanted to type in their entire fully authenticated Google email address, and we were trying to come up with ways that we could make sure they only put in their Google username, their short name, and so you can, those may be some of the challenges that you face. You can put some of that in your instructions. This page is kind of boilerplate. You can't really change anything, which is why we have that warning page just before this one. And after you've authenticated, you're going to go through a few screens where the device is enrolling itself. And then the next step, if you've set it up this way, is to create your account and log in. And this goes back to some of the settings that we set up in the pre-stage, where we said we want to pre-fill the user's information. So we do that. All they have to do is put in their password, verify their password, hit go, and their account is created. So challenges, decisions that we had to face, deciding how many pre-stages to use. Do we use a single pre-stage? Do we use multiple pre-stages? In the past, we had one pre-stage for staff in each building and one pre-stage for students in each building. With 7 buildings, that's 14 pre-stages. So because this was going to be a custom pre-stage, we were facing, well, do we build 7 schools? Do we build 7 pre-stages for this custom enrollment? And we finally decided we were going to use one. We had the Google LDAP connection issues due to our domain structure that I mentioned earlier, and I did a lot of research using linking things off of that link that will be in the handouts. We eventually found the right settings to work through that. We had to decide how many steps to put into that enrollment customization, how much detail to give to the end user. We tried out a lot of things. We had a lot of steps, and we eventually brought that down to just what we felt was the bare minimum. And then our last issue that I didn't really discuss was Wi-Fi issues. If you hand this device to a teacher, or if you deliver it to them at their house over the summer, let's say, and they turn this on at their house and they connect to their home Wi-Fi, no problem. But when they're on campus, we have the internal side of our Wi-Fi where we push a configuration profile to allow that device to get onto the internal side, a district-owned device to get onto the internal side of our Wi-Fi. And we have a guest Wi-Fi, but the guest Wi-Fi has a splash screen, and the splash screen caused the enrollment process to time out. So we eventually put together a set of instructions for an enrollment Wi-Fi. And the enrollment Wi-Fi is a limited Wi-Fi that only allows folks to get just a couple of places. If you connected to it as a user, you wouldn't be able to get to too many places on the internet. So what we ended up doing was creating that enrollment only Wi-Fi that allows the enrollment process. Then, as soon as the enrollment happens, right before the user puts in their password, one of the steps of enrollment is we have a few configuration profiles that get pushed down. One of those pushes the internal Wi-Fi down to the computer and sets it as the preferred Wi-Fi. And then, in order for the enrollment Wi-Fi to not work, we push down a configuration profile that has the enrollment Wi-Fi with an incorrect password. We also do the same thing for the guest Wi-Fi because we find for some reason a lot of our users end up trying to put our machines on our guest Wi-Fi, and then they don't get access to a lot of things because they're not authenticated the correct way. So those are a couple of things that happen at enrollment. We just loaded those configuration profiles into the pre-stage, and that ended up solving the problems we had with the guest Wi-Fi splash screen timing out the enrollment process, or not wanting to hand out the password for the internal Wi-Fi, or not wanting to hand out another password for a separate Wi-Fi that then people would share with anybody. I don't know if you've worked in a high school, but if you want students to know something, make sure you tell staff not to tell them that, and then everybody will know it in 5 minutes. So we created that Wi-Fi that allows just the enrollment process. Those are our decisions that we had to make. Those are our challenges that we faced. That's our path to zero touch enrollment. And what I really hope is that you are able to take some of that knowledge, apply it to your situation, and move forward. If you're looking at zero touch enrollment, it is a great process. The end product is really worth the effort that you put into it. I do know that there is a Jamf session coming up. I believe it's on Thursday. I'm not sure. That goes through the same thing. It's a hands-on lab for zero touch enrollment. Take a look at that one, and thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you tuning in today.